welcome. It's 6 o'clock, so this is a good time. Everybody's on time. Wonderful. I'll give it another minute, but I'll just introduce myself, and then I'll ask the other people who are here from Soha to introduce themselves. But welcome. This is the Ask Us Anything About Home Ownership. So I'm Rachel Farrington. I'm the communications manager here at Soha. It's my pleasure to host these kind of events. It means we all get to learn a little bit more as well, which is lovely. So on screen, you'll see my colleagues Liz and Paige from communications, if they wouldn't mind giving a wave. And they're just here to support. And then we have our speakers this evening. We've got Warwick and Sian. So Sian, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, I'm Sian Hooper. I'm currently head of sales and home ownership. And I've been with Soha for about 3.5 years.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Warwick, welcome. Would you like to tell us who you are?
Thank you. Yes, hello everyone. I'm Warwick Ainsworth Parker. I am the Director of Housing and Communities here at Soha. Yeah, I've been at Soha about probably about 4 years now. So yeah, just a little bit longer than Sian.
Excellent. So the way that these things work is that we have some questions in advance, and we'll answer those first. And then if you have any questions yourself, that it's either a follow-up question, or you're thinking, you know what, I just want to, it's a separate question, just put it in the chat. Or as there's not a huge amount of us, you can just say, oh, I've got a question. You don't even need to turn your camera on, just turn your mic off, on rather than off, and then we'll be able to hear you. So I'm going to start with our first question that was given in advance. So we have, what's the difference between ground rent and service charges? And yep, Sian, you look like you're about to answer, so off you go.
So ground rent is a charge that you pay essentially for the land that the property sits on. And then your service charges are for communal maintenance and management. So things like cleaning of buildings and ground maintenance, lift maintenance if you've got a lift, any third-party management fees that are associated with the management of the block. So yeah, they're very different charges.
Excellent. So just would you tell me a little bit more about what you know, if you does that if you've never owned a flat, I've been a shared owner of a flat, and it was all difficult with the bills all mixed together basically. So how do I know, how do I see that when I'm a shared owner? How do you present it?
So every year you'll get a service charge statement that will give you a breakdown of the individual charges. So for example, you'll see on that statement something that stipulates the structural maintenance, and then further down in your service charge statement you'll have a breakdown of exactly what work took place over the year to make up that charge. And it will break it down into grounds maintenance and communal cleaning, communal gas and electricity. So it's very clearly broken down on the statement so that you can see what the total charge is made up from.
And that's an annual document?
Yeah, that comes out annually.
My housing association did not do that. So it's interesting. Well, thank you. Does anybody have any follow-up questions on that? No? Lovely. Okay, well, I'll move on to the next one then. So there are some rules around ground rent. So how far do those rules affect home ownership? What happens? Because obviously as a housing association there are rules, but also as a resident you've got rules. So Warwick, you look like you're going to take that one. So
the government have just recently are changing the rules on ground rent and limiting it to a maximum of £250 a year. So that won't actually have an effect on any of our residents, because we don't have any ground rents that are more than £250 anyway. So it's not. I think it's something that will affect places in London probably more specifically. But yeah, so our ground rents are all below that. We did have some old properties or older leases that had a doubling of ground rent, which we remove as necessary. And so yeah, so that it won't be an effect. And in fact, when we offer new leases, we offer them with 0 ground rent. So it's not something that we do anyway.
Why is that? Why is it 0 for new ones?
It's just that is the way forward was to remove ground rents. It's it's not a necessary charge, and if it's on lease, it's on a lease. But when we're offering new ones, that's now removed.
Do other people do that?
Yeah.
Or is that?
Yeah, it's common. It's moving that way. It's just a change in how the leases are worked.
Excellent. And how long are the leases?
Yeah, so we when we originally set up in '97, we had 99-year leases, and that they moved to 125 years. But now all our new leases are 990 years. So again, that just saves it saves having to renew the lease, which is just extra expense. So yeah, all our new leases are 990. Or if you get a lease extension, we offer it at 990. Yeah.
So
tell us a bit about lease extensions. Yeah. And then Monica, will come to you. Thank you for putting your hand up. I appreciate that. Go on, Sian. Tell us a bit about lease extensions.
So yeah, when so shared owners are not automatically entitled to lease extensions, although we do offer it through the informal route. And we offer a new term of 990 years. With leaseholders, we also offer the 990 years on an informal extension. Unfortunately, if leaseholders choose to go down the formal route, then that just is an additional 90 years that's added to the term.
What's the difference between the formal route and the informal route?
Cost is the first thing. I mean, the formal route means that we don't have a say. There's a legal entitlement people have to a lease extension if they're a leaseholder. So it's a statutory length of time, and we have to offer that, which is why it's only 90 years, because that's what we're told it has to be. The fact is, we choose to also offer an informal route, as Sian says, which is we'll extend it for 990 years. And we'll remove the ground rent, and we'll make it pretty much exactly the same as you would do down the formal route. It's just cheaper because there's less solicitors involved. But yes, it's the option is there for both.
Does that have an impact if you sell then? That
yeah, I mean,
arrangement, is it just with the resident and not with the property?
A longer lease is really important. Well, not a longer lease, but it's good to have a good length of lease. So once a lease gets below 85 years, it starts to potentially affect the value, or certainly to affect the mortgageability and the saleability of a property. So once you get below 80 years, it gets more expensive at the moment to extend a lease. So we've spent a long time recently contacting people, encouraging them, if their leases are between sort of 80 and 85 years, to think about extending, because as it gets shorter, it just gets more expensive to do.
We've got another question from the chat that's similar, about when you have a bit of money, how can that help you in your shared ownership journey? So if you're looking at a property that's perhaps 50% shared ownership, and you don't have that much, so maybe you've got 35 and you know that you can do the 35, and you have a deposit. How does that work? Are you still eligible? Is it possible to purchase a property if you know you can't do the full percentage, but you have a healthy deposit?
So it very much depends with shared ownership where you're coming to shared ownership from. So if it's a brand new property that you're looking to buy, then we can offer a range of percentages. So effectively what we do is we have a sales team, and we have an external companies that are shared ownership assessors, and they will have a look at your. They have to, because it's a government-backed scheme, they have to make sure that you qualify for shared ownership. So they would look at your earnings, your income, your situation, your deposit, and they would effectively tell you what you could buy, what you could borrow at, and they would confirm that you do qualify to purchase a shared ownership property. And then with a new home, we can sell with some leases between 25 and 75%, and with others between 10 and 75%, depending on which type of lease it is. So yes, it's basically you find a property that you like, and if you can afford to buy 25% of it, then that's what you do. If you can afford 35, then that's what you do. And then obviously you can buy more. Once you've bought it, you don't have to stop there. You can then add to that. Staircasing is what we call it, but you can buy further shares if you want to stay in the property for the long term.
So what about resales in that case then? So what if I'm looking on Rightmove and there's a lovely house that's a 50% shared ownership, so I can't go lower than that, is that correct?
That's right. So the person who's selling that owns 50%, so you would need to buy their 50% off them.
Right.
What you can do is you can buy more than that. So in almost every case, we can sell. If you looked at that and said, well, I love that house, they've got 50%, but actually I can afford 75% of it, then we can sell you an additional 25%. And in fact, we can do that at the same time. So it's just one purchase. So effectively, it feels like you're just buying it off the person who's selling it. But in the middle, we're adding 25% to their 50 so that you end up buying 75. So there's flexibility upwards, but not downwards, no, because the person who's selling it wants all of their money for their share, so they need to sell whatever they own. So if it could be 25%, but it could be 75. So yes, when it's resale, it's the lower amount is dictated by how much the current person owns.
So I have two questions that were from before the session. Like I came into the session with some questions that had been asked previously, so I'm going to ask them now. We've got one question about service charges. So going back to what we were talking about before, rent increases. So every year my rent goes up. What happens if I can't keep up with my service charges? So Warwick's gonna answer.
Yeah, I can answer. So I mean, obviously that's two slightly separate things as well. You've got your rent going up, so you've got the rental element of the shared ownership property, which will say in your lease how much it goes up, and that's normally a few percent each year, depending on RPI or CPI, depending on which mechanism. Just to make things complicated, it's never always the same one. So there's a few variances. And then you've got your service charge, which is obviously a payment for the services that you require in the building. And they've gone up quite a lot recently just because of the general cost of living. So, the cleaning companies, the staffers, their salaries have gone up, so the company costs more. So those things have gone up, and we noticed that. So if you're struggling, then there's we have teams within Sohar that are there to try and help you. So we've got the home ownership team would be the first place to go, and there are people that can look at payment plans or that can look at budgets with you and actually go through and assess the finance and try and work with you to find a way to doing it. Obviously the first thing we can do is make sure that the service charge is correct and make sure that those are the services that you should be paying for. But yeah, and then there's we do have things at Sohar such as a hardship fund and other funds that if necessary, if circumstances change and there's a real need, we can assess whether there is something that we can do to help in a financial way. And then more generally, we have a lot of expertise at Sohar who know the right people to speak to externally, so we can signpost to organisations that are real experts in finances and that can try and help out. So we would always say if you're struggling to pay for anything, the sooner you get in touch, the better, because we can help, and there are lots of people here willing to sort of put time in to try and help you through that. So yeah, home ownership would be the place to start.
Thank you. And then one more, similar actually, to, you said a phrase, if circumstances change. And if circumstances change, you might find yourself being eligible for universal credit. You know, your circumstance might change. If you are on universal credit and you are a shared owner, or you're a homeowner, what's the impact of that? Can you still be a shared owner? Can you still have a shared ownership home? Oh, yeah, Sean's giving it the nods. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can claim universal credit, but it will only help you with your rent element. You can't claim it for your mortgage. The other useful thing to note with universal credit and shared ownership is no bedroom tax or local housing allowance applies to shared ownership, like it does with rentals. So you're not being having a deduction because you are classed as having too many bedrooms, and there's no rent cap. So with rentals, there is a maximum threshold of what you could claim for, say, a 2 or a 3-bed property. You don't have that with shared ownership.
I've got one more question, and it was literally, what do you think people should know about home ownership? And I think maybe we'll start with Warwick and we'll finish with Sian, and then we'll close.
Oh, thank you. What should people know about home ownership? I mean, I think from our point of view, shared ownership, I mean, Sohar is a housing association, and housing associations people tend to think of as for rental properties and for renting properties out to people in housing need. And I think we feel shared ownership is a really important gap or bridge between home ownership and rental. So it gives those people, there's such a big, to be able to buy a property, properties are so expensive nowadays, to be able to go from renting to outright ownership of a house, particularly in places like Oxfordshire, where we are in a very expensive part of the country. I just think we see home ownership as, it's not right for everyone, but it really has a place, and shared ownership allows so many people to be able to do that. It used to be, the perception was it was for first-time buyers, it was for young people trying to move out from their parents. More and more now, it's people in their 30s, 40s, possible. Sometimes it's relationship breakdown and people are separating and they still want to have some sort of home ownership. So they're buying perhaps 2 properties instead of 1. But it's a really it's a growing area, and I think we're about 17% of Sohar's properties are shared ownership. So it's quite a substantial part of Sohar, and it's growing in popularity. So I think it's here to stay, and from our point of view, we just think it's a really useful tool for people who want ownership but can't quite afford the Oxfordshire prices that we have at the moment.
Thank you. Sian, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I reiterate what Warwick says. It's a great product, and I just think people perhaps, we could, I don't know, but people need to understand what they're buying, and I think that's really important. But it's great and used to get people on the ladder. It's great that they're able to do that when they wouldn't ordinarily be able to go and buy off the open market.
Excellent, thank you. So
just add to that. I think one thing that is important, because we're noticing it very much now, is that property markets, there's the boom and bust element of property markets, and sometimes it's really busy and sometimes it's really quiet. And what we find is shared ownership really is quite a steady presence in the market. So actually, it's often easier to sell a shared ownership property because there's more demand for it. And when people are not buying property and it's more difficult to sell property, people then tend to not be able to afford them, so that they look at shared ownership instead. So it doesn't really matter what the market's like. Shared ownership is still very popular. So I think that's a really, it's always, we're finding it a very busy market, even when the market for the open property sales is sort of tempered. So it's quite a good product in that sense.
Well, thank you. So we have covered rent increase, service charges, the rules around limiting ground rent. We've talked about universal credit and how that doesn't have to be a barrier. We've talked about resale percentages versus new home percentages and how much you can buy. We've talked about the gap between potentially selling a home and then buying a new one. We've covered a huge amount. So thank you all very much for coming. And I hope that you've taken something away. And even if it's just the email address that Shana's given in the chat, then I hope that that's something for you. So thank you all so much for your time. And that's goodbye from us. So good night, everybody.